Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining tonight. My name is Christina. I am the coordinator for the in-training program at Sport at BC. I'm here with Brent Days from Langara College. He's going to be giving us a little bit of a spiel of his guest speaking for tonight. Brent, hello. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Brett's going to go over a little bit of lowdown of what to look for, of sort of like, recovery with yourself in the sports realm. I know a lot of you are in the run walk program. So being aware of, what's the mentality you're going into, how to continuously be striving to your fitness level. So we have brought Brett here today to give us a little few pointers and a lowdown. So Brett, thank you, and feel free to take the floor.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here presenting to this group of participants. And if you have any questions at any point, just please let me know. I definitely will be taking questions at the end. So if you rather save them for the end, that would be great as well. But right now, I'm just going to share my screen and pop up a presentation. All right. Everybody see the presentation up? We're all good? All right. So what I'm going to do tonight is present a little bit about how we can incorporate sports science into our training. Now, a lot of people hear the word sports science and they automatically think about professional athletes, elite athletes, using all this different tech in order to become a better athlete. But the reality is with sports science, it's starting to get to the point where accessibility to the tech is pretty much available to everybody. And most of us probably already have some of the tech. We're not aware of it. So today I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea of how you can utilize sports science into your training. And it can be for any level. It doesn't have to be for elite or professional athletes. It can be from the weekend warriors to the rec athletes to someone who's just trying to improve their 5K run. So that's sort of the goal of the presentation today. Before I get started in the presentation, a little bit about myself. I have a master's in science from Edith Cowan University in Australia. I'm a certified strength and conditioning specialist through the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and I am a registered kinesiologist with the British Columbia Association of Kinesiologists. I've been a professor at Langara College for 15 years now, and that's in kinesiology. And I also run the Applied Human Performance Research Lab at Langara College as well. So with that high performance lab, as well as my own little side business called Real Kinetic Fitness, I do work with a lot of various high performance athletes, as well as youth athletes and some recreational athletes. So I do have a wide variety of experience when it comes to sport, athletes, and competition. Also myself, I once was a Ironman triathlete and have competed in several triathlons as well as long distance runs. So I'm hoping my practical experience along with my educational experience can give you a little bit of an idea of how to help yourself perform better at any level, not just with your running or your walking, but just in life in general. So when it comes to sports science, as I mentioned, it does seem to be a term that some people can be a little bit nervous or afraid about because maybe we just don't know what it is. But really all sports science is just balancing evidence-based knowledge with practical-based knowledge. So a good sports scientist is someone who's going to look at the research that is out there and figure out how to apply it in a practical setting. Now, when it comes to evidence-based knowledge, that's usually just the acquiring knowledge from scientific study and investigation. Well, practical-based knowledge is more situations that arise from any sort of uncontrolled environment. So when we look at sports science in general, what we're trying to do is blend the two. We're trying to blend the evidence-based knowledge with that practical-based knowledge, really to help the athletes take a holistic approach at becoming a overall better performer. So why I say holistic approach, because I believe athletes are not just athletes, they're obviously people as well. And what we're trying to do is make sure that they are healthy individuals throughout their career, but also their lifetime. And if we apply the right type of principles to these athletes and give them this holistic approach, we will make them more all-around healthy individuals from the start of their sport career to the end of their life. Because a lot of the times what happens is these athletes get a little bit lost when their career is over and they don't necessarily live the most healthiest lifestyle afterwards. So sports science is trying to blend that aspect of holistic living with performance as well. So when it comes to what we're trying to accomplish and what I want to accomplish in this presentation is just teach you a little bit about fatigue and how to manage fatigue and how to avoid fatigue in your everyday life, whether it's for your running or just for your daily activities. So there's two types of fatigue that athletes go through. There's psychological fatigue and physiological fatigue. So the psychological fatigue would be more what a sports psychologist would deal with. So that is more about motivation, burnout, areas where it's more built into your psychology versus your actual physiology. Physiological fatigue is more of the neural fatigue as well as the muscular fatigue. So there is those two types of fatigue that will eventually get us at some point during training or during life. And that could obviously be detrimental to our health, but it also could be detrimental to our performance. So what we want to be able to do is monitor and manage those two types of fatigues, the neural and the muscular fatigue, in order to help us really take that holistic approach of being an individual who lives a healthy lifestyle that is performing at their optimal ability at whatever age and whatever activity they're doing. So one of the best models of recovery is Penfold's recovery pyramid. Now, this pyramid just gives us a little bit of an idea of how we can take an athlete and help them holistically. So when we look at this Penfold's recovery pyramid, and we'll go over each one of them so you kind of have an idea of how to utilize each in order to optimize your recovery and your performance. And I always sort of lump in recovery with performance, because if you're not recovered from your daily activities, you're not going to be performing at your best level. So when we look at the base of this pyramid, the base of the pyramid is just the three most important aspects of living a healthy lifestyle. And that's making sure you're eating properly, making sure you're getting enough sleep, and making sure you're managing stress. Those three are really the pillars to a healthy lifestyle. And the better nutrition we have, the more sleep that we get, and the better our stress management is, we're going to be a healthy, recovered individual. The next aspect of the Penfold recovery is training, right? Most people don't realize that training actually is not only a way to enhance performance, but it's also a way to enhance recovery. The stronger we are, the fitter we are, that's going to result in recovering faster as well as performing better. The middle part of the pyramid is really where sports science sort of meets this recovery aspect, and that's monitoring. So monitoring not only the progress of an individual, but also their performance as well as their recovery. So monitoring is going to take a look at things like, how well are you sleeping? How well are you training? How well are you performing? What's happening during performance? And that way we can start looking at, is the athlete not recovered enough, or is the athlete recovered? Do we need to manage the load a little bit, or do we need to increase training load in order to optimize what's happening? And then the second to last layer is treatment. So treatment is things like going to practitioners like chiropractor, massage therapist, physiotherapist, just the practitioners that can aid in our recovery, aid in our ability to facilitate muscular recovery after hard training sessions. And the top of the pyramid, or the cherry on the top, if you would wish, is recovery modalities. All right, the recovery modalities are the fancy things you see on social media that everyone says is going to help you optimize your recovery. But really, the modalities that we'll talk about today have a very small part in recovery. All right, a 4-hour massage gun session isn't going to replace 8 hours of sleep, right? If you're not taking care of the bottom parts of the pyramid, the modalities aren't going to work. All right. So it's really just a small enhancement on how to increase your recovery and increase your lifestyle. So I'm not going to talk about nutrition because that is out of my scope of practice. And I think most people know, what nutrition should look like and how we can eat to perform, right? Getting the right types of protein, making sure we're getting adequate carbs, and making sure that we're eating the right types of fats. So what I'm going to focus more on is the sleep and the stress management. All right. And first, we'll talk about the stress management aspect. So stress management, whether you're a professional athlete, elite athlete, or a recreational athlete, all are going to be very similar. We all have tremendous amounts of responsibilities throughout the day that's going to add into not only the psychological fatigue that we talked about, but also the physiological fatigue. All right. So stress can decrease the neural adaptation as well as the neural drive that we get from training and for performance. So we have to make sure we're managing our stress on a daily basis in order to recover properly. So we all have commitments like work, family, social life, various hobbies that we want to do. There's various circumstances that come into play, maybe when we're performing, maybe when we're going to our first run, right? The competition aspect of it, that's a little bit of a stress that we need to manage. There might be travel involved. That's a little bit of a stress that we need to manage as well. All right. So typically what we see with stress is just those things that, elevate our senses, things that bother us a little bit, the things that make us uncomfortable. All stress really is just a stimulus placed upon the body that we'll either adapt to, or it will unfortunately get the better of us. If we can manage it if we can manage it properly, we won't have to worry about it increasing our, we won't have to worry about it affecting our recovery, right? We'll be able to actually manage that stress, have the strategies necessary to manage it, and be able to cope with it, and then be able to recover properly. But the more we let stress get to us, especially if it's that chronic stress where we're, every single day we're starting to see something compiling, and it's just stress after stress after stress, then it starts impacting things like training. It starts impacting things like sleep. It even starts impacting nutrition. And then that's just going to decrease our recovery versus enhancing our recovery. So stress management is a real big part of optimizing our performance and recovering properly. Sleep, obviously, if we look at what's the most important part, nutrition, obviously important, but sleep is going to be the key. Sleep is where we recover. Sleep is also where we adapt from training. So when we put stress on us, whether it is that psychological stress or the physiological stress, our body needs to recover from it and adapt. All right. If you think about humans, how we adapt to stress is we place it upon us. So example, running. If we want to run further, we have to steadily progress by adding a small amount of mileage or time onto our training program. When we do that and we sleep, our body will adapt. Unfortunately, we're not like dogs who adapt while the stress is being placed upon them. We need that recovery. We need that sleep. So sleep is sleep is an area that is really being more researched now and understood a little bit more as well. And it is one of the most simplest approaches to recovery that we can take, because we do have control over when we go to sleep. We have control of when we wake up, and we really can control what we do while we sleep. So these are some tips here that I always give athletes, as well as youth athletes and just people who want to improve their sleep. I call it how to sleep like a champion. And there's 8 little things that you can do to help enhance your quality of sleep. Because I think what we need to understand is the general consensus is that we need 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. But for me, quality over quantity is much more important. We need to make sure that whatever amount we're sleeping, whether it's 6, 7, 8 hours, we get as much quality of sleep as possible. And these 8 little tips will help improve that quality. So the first thing to do is bedtime routine. And for those who have kids, they probably know the strict routines that they place upon their kids in order to get them to go to sleep on time, and make sure that they're decompressed from the day and ready to have a good night's sleep. And it's the same thing for teenagers, adults, everyone. A bedtime routine will help you calm down from the day and get into that deep sleep. Other aspect, obviously, a dark environment, right? A dark environment plays a huge role because the light can impact our quality of sleep, because it could wake us up in the middle of the night, and it might make it harder to go back to sleep. So a dark environment is another important aspect, right? We're at the point now of the year where it's getting darker a lot earlier, so it's a little bit easier to it's a little easier to keep a dark environment and fall asleep a little bit better. Probably heard this a lot: avoid screens. Avoid screens up to 2 hours prior to sleep. I know for a lot of people that's difficult because you're doing some extra work. You might be doing some work. You might have some other responsibilities that require being on a laptop or require being on your phone or tablet or just watching TV. If you can't avoid screens, you can, on phones and laptops, you can turn the blue light off at certain times. I turn my phone, my laptop, my anything, I turn the blue light off for 7 o'clock, and it doesn't come back on until 7 in the morning the next day. So if you can reduce the amount of blue light that gets into your eyes with blue light blocker glasses, or by switching off your phone's blue light, that will help you fall asleep as well, because it will help increase the melatonin production as well as eventually our sleep pressure hormones. Make sure your room is cool. 18 degrees Celsius is an ideal room temperature to fall asleep. Cool room will help you get into that deep quality sleep. Much like the bedtime routine, sleep schedule. Make sure you have a schedule of when you're going to go to sleep, when you're going to wake up. A schedule will help that. Make sure you cancel all disturbances and cancel noise, as well as bright lights. All right. So if you think about what are some disturbances, noise, and bright lights, typically most people, when I ask them what is their biggest disturbance or noise or light that comes on during their sleep, it's their phone. So I always suggest for people to sleep with their phone outside of their bedroom. That way they won't have the potential pop-up of a light, maybe a noise or a disturbance. There's some research showing that people actually are waking up in the middle of the night to check their phone because they're afraid they've missed something, or they want to see what's happening. So just by removing your phone from your room, that will substantially increase your quality of sleep as well. So when we look at that recovery aspect, that base of the pyramid, I would say sleep is the most important. Nutrition would be the next most important, and then managing that stress. That's going to allow us to recover properly from our day, our training, our competition, whatever it might be. The next aspect of that pyramid we look at is the training plan. All right. So training will actually not only enhance our performance, but it will enhance our recovery. The fitter we are, which means the higher aerobic capacity we have. So the further we can run, that's going to require more oxygen inside of our bodies, which is transported through our blood. The more oxygen we have inside our bodies and our blood, it's going to recover. We're going to recover faster. All right. So by having a good cardiovascular training plan, it will allow us to recover faster. Having a good, strong, powerful muscular system also is going to help recover faster, especially from tiny little, maybe nagging injuries. I had an athlete that sprained his ankle and was back after a sprained ankle after a week, just because of how strong he was. He was a real strong athlete, and his recovery time was cut almost in half by that strength. So being strong will help with injury recovery. It will also help potentially decrease some injury risk. And then we get into things like speed, agility, and skill. Not necessarily going to enhance recovery, but it's going to increase our performance. It also will help with decreasing injury as well. But when it comes to running, cardiovascular training obviously is going to be the most important aspect of someone who's competing in running, with muscular strength as a secondary component to help really with resiliency of our muscles in our body. The more resilient our body is, the easier it will be to increase our aerobic and anaerobic capacity through running. Now, when it comes to the sports science side of things, and that's the monitoring. So this is where we look at load monitoring, load management. How do we take care of ourselves when we are increasing mileage from a run, or we're increasing mileage from cycling, or we're increasing mileage from swimming? All right. So what are we doing that is going to make it harder for the body to recover? So when it comes to load monitoring and management, we have a couple loads that we look at, and that's the plus load and the minus load. So the plus load is really the activity and what's happening, where the minus load is more about the recovery aspect. So when we look at the plus load, we see two types of load that we put onto our body. And that is the external load and the internal load. So the external load is the dose of activity. All right. So the external load is what our distance is. How long are we running for? So it could be distance, it could be time. If we're in the weight room, it's weight lifted. If we're doing speed work, it's how many accelerations and decelerations do we do? If we're doing plyometrics, it could be jump count. All right. Or if we're in more advanced resistance training, what's the bar velocity? How fast are we running, or how fast are we lifting? All right. So external load is the dose of activity. And for the most part, when we look at things like training load and monitoring that training load, most people use the dose of activity as their way of tracking their progress. So they'll use total distance or time, or how many, what's their distance or time per kilometer. All right. So a lot of people will use their dose of activity, but in reality, what we need to do when we do training load is look at internal load. So the response to that activity. So what's happening to our body when we're putting it through that distance or that time. So when we look at internal load, we start looking at things like our heart rate percentage, right? What's our max heart rate? What's our average heart rate? What's our heart rate doing during that distance or that time? So we can do that through heart rate derived training load or TRIMP, which is another form of training load calculation. We can do something like session RPE to monitor internal load. So session RPE is just the monitoring of intensity. So what did you feel your intensity was for that workout? All right, so you went for a 20-kilometer cycle. When you get back, write down from 1 to 10 how hard you thought you worked. Right, so session RP is a way to monitor that response to activity. We can do questionnaires. Questionnaires are a great way of monitoring fatigue by just answering questionnaires daily. And that's just simple things like how much sleep did you get? What's your stress levels at? How sore are you? How much energy you have, right? So just simple questionnaires like that. You can just rank it 1 to 5 and go from there. Okay. We can get into a little bit more advanced ways of monitoring internal load with things like muscle activity. Muscle activity could be, again, monitored through certain types of heart rate monitors. It also could be monitored through things like force plates, where we're looking at what our counter movement jump force production is during certain points of the training phase. Another way of monitoring internal load is calories, right? How many calories did you burn? How many calories did it cost for you to do that certain distance of running? So the two easiest ways to monitor load, though, would be using your heart rate and either doing a session RPE training load calculation or a TRIMP training load calculation. So the key into it is, if you're just tracking distance, as I said, you're not tracking response to the distance. You're just tracking the dose. So you're just telling yourself, this is how far I've been going in my training. Right? If you want to get a true training load score, you have to incorporate intensity in some way, whether it's the session RPE, or whether it's your heart rate, or whether it's a training load formula. Now, the minus load, as I said, is it comes down to recovery. How are we recovering? All right. And we can do that with sleep quality or sleep quantity. Sleep quantity is obviously, I went to bed at 10 and I woke up at 6. And I got this many hours of sleep. Sleep quality is obviously a little bit more complex, because now we're looking at what stages of sleep were I in and how long were they in for. There are some companies that market their watches as a way of tracking that quality of sleep. I haven't seen any true validation of that yet, because I think the only way we can really get quality of sleep is it by measuring brain waves. Brain waves would really be the only way to tell me if I'm actually in the right cycles or not. All right. But some people have got benefits out of looking at sleep quality numbers from their various data that their wristwatch provides. For me, the best measure of recovery is heart rate variability. Now, heart rate variability is a biomarker of the central nervous system and the heart, and it gives us an idea of exactly how we are recovering. All right, and it could give us a daily number on how we're recovering. So what I'm going to do now is talk a little bit about how we can monitor internal load and also heart rate variability. So there's two ways to measure internal load. As I mentioned, you can use session RPE or you can use training load. So we have subjective measures and objective measures. Subjective measures are obviously the ones that are more athlete participated, right? So session RPE, that would be a athlete participation subjective measure. How hard do you think you worked? Rate it from 1 to 10. Readiness questionnaire, same thing. Training and lifestyle questions, it's athlete participation based. If we go to trimp or training loads, there's a couple things we can do, and that's more objective measures. So this is when we're actually using technology, and it's going to be essentially heart rate, speed, a speed heart rate combination, a speed heart rate distance combination. All right. It just depends what technology we have access to. If you don't have access to any technology, and really all the technology is that you need for heart rate training loads are a watch that measures your heart rate and your distance, or a heart rate monitor. If you have access to those, you can do a training load calculation. So here's the first one I'm going to show you. It's a real simplistic method. It uses the subjective measure of session RPE. And what we're essentially doing is doing our workout, rating the session from 1 to 10. And ideally, you want to rate that session about 10 to 30 minutes after. If we do it immediately after, what happens is we tend to think about how it ended instead of the entire session. So if you, let's say we're going in your workout and you went fairly easy, and then the last 5 kilometers, you just went as hard as you could. All right. Or the last kilometer, you went as hard as you could. You stopped, you're panting, you're really tired after that. And then you think to yourself, okay, that was like an 8. Right? But you're only thinking about what you did in that moment or how you're feeling in that moment. If you cool down a little bit, go through some stretching, think about it a little bit more, you'll get a little bit more of an accurate session RPE score. All right. So then from there, what you do is you can get your training load by just taking your session time. All right. So your dose and timesing it by your session RPE, your response. And then so if example, if I did a 55-minute workout and I felt it was a 5 out of 10, my training load for that specific workout would be 275. All right. And this just gives us a number to quantify what that workout was like. Okay. Now, another way we can do this, and if I can just go in the chat, I put a link. I put a link that will take you to this copied Google sheet that I made up. All right. And now this, can you see the Google sheet right now? Is it up? Okay. So this Google sheet is, again, this is the TRIMP formula. So this is a complete formula for the TRIMP training load. And what you do is we have male and female. So what you do is if you're wearing a watch or you're wearing a heart rate, you'll have all the data you need to incorporate this training load system into your programming. So the first thing you do is you put your dose. Okay, you put your time. So I did a 60-minute workout. Then you put your heart rate average. Okay, your heart rate average. So let's say my average heart rate for that 60 minutes was 150. Then you put your resting heart rate from that morning. All right. So again, if you wear your watch all day, all you need to do is just go to what your resting heart rate was for that day. Okay. So let's say it was today 60. And then you put your heart rate max for that workout as well. So let's say I got up to 167 beats per minute. Then from there, it's going to give you your training load, 219. Okay. So we have our dose followed by our response to that dose. And then it gives us the number. So what does this number mean? Well, this number is a individual source of what type of training load you placed upon yourself for that day. And then we can go to the second part here, which is training load tracker. And then we can put what our TRIMP score was for that day. And then we can start monitoring it day by day. And then essentially what it shows you is, okay, for 4 days, I've had a very high load. I better drop it down a little bit because I'm a little bit fatigued. So I need to decrease my load, either decrease the intensity, decrease the time, and then drop my load down a little bit. All right. So it's just a real simplistic measure to continue to measure your dose and how you're responding to that dose. And that's what the simplistic shrimp formula can do. So whether you use the one with the session RPE or the heart rate, you're going to give yourself a little bit of a scientific quantified number that is going to help you essentially monitor your progress and monitor how you're responding and how much load you're putting onto your body. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is using heart rate variability to monitor your recovery. All right, and we can use heart rate variability and training load side by side, right? So we can see our training load going up and our heart rate variability going down. All right, we know load's high, we're not recovering, and then that way we can adjust as necessary. All right, so when it comes to heart rate variability, again, if you have an Apple Watch, you have a valid way to measure heart rate variability. My colleague and research partner, Dr. Andrew Parada, 2 years ago released a study that validated the Apple Watch as a viable measure of heart rate variability. So what heart rate variability essentially is doing is telling us what our root mean square of successive differences between normal heartbeats is. All right, so whatever that is, it's a score that essentially tells you the variability between ventricular contractions. All right, so if you think about your heart rate, okay, most people, I would say, when you say what's your resting heart rate, most people are probably around 60 seconds, 60, 70 seconds is their resting heart rate. So if your resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute, does that mean our heart is beating every single second for a minute? So is it perfectly like a metronome beating every second? It's not. If it is, then that is a problem. That means you're going to have a very low heart rate variability, and that means that you are either sick or really, really under recovered. So those ventricular contractions, they're variable. All right, so they have a variability, and it's obviously, it can be timed. So the Apple Watch is one way of measuring it. And then for some people who train, they have Polar H10 monitors or other monitors that would work with this app called Kubios. So Kubios is the gold standard of heart rate variability, and it's a free app that works with Polar H10 and most other heart rate straps. But like I said, if you have an Apple Watch, you can use that as well. So what heart rate variability is essentially telling us is based on that variable contraction between ventricular contractions is going to tell us whether we are in the parasympathetic or the sympathetic nervous system. So when we look at parasympathetic is rest and digest. So parasympathetic is when we wake up, and ideally you want to test your heart rate variability first thing in the morning. So when we wake up, and if we have a heart rate variability score that is high, so the RMSSD is high, that means we are in the parasympathetic nervous system. And that is an indication of recovery. That is telling us that we are recovered from whatever physical or psychological stress that we have placed upon us previous day. If our RMSSD score is low, all right, if it's low, you're in the sympathetic, the fight or flight. So that is indicating that we are not recovered. We're more in an elevated stressed state. All right. So our lab at Langara, we've looked a lot at heart rate variability and whether parasympathetic and sympathetic is a good measure of should I perform, should I not perform, should I take some time off, should I go hard? What we're starting to find is that it's more chronic, especially in the sympathetic, right? If you wake up one day and you're like, oh, I feel good, but my heart rate variability says I'm sympathetic, which means I'm not recovered. If it's just one day, not necessarily means a bad thing. It's when we start seeing it chronically, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight days of low heart rate variability. Now we know we're really not recovering from our training or even just our day-to-day stress, right? So that's why it's good to use training load with heart rate variability, right? Are we seeing training load go up, and are we seeing heart rate variability going down and staying down while that goes up? All right. So then we start seeing that association between higher training load, not recovering. And that's why these two metrics are very valuable in terms of identifying under recovered athletes, as well as helping athletes perform optimally. Okay, let's just move on to the last two components of the pyramid, and that's just the treatment and the modalities. So treatment, we're looking at obviously the chronic aspect of recovery. Am I hurt? Well, we would see a physiotherapist, maybe a chiropractor, massage therapist, or acute care athletic therapist. We can use physiotherapists, chiropractors, massage therapists. We can use them for basic body maintenance as well, right? Massage obviously facilitates muscle or facilitates blood flow to the muscles, which will help with recovery, right? Chiropractic care might help keep the body in line to make sure that we decrease the risk of overuse injuries. Physiotherapy, same thing. It could be preventative care as well as recovery care. And then modalities, we look at the various modalities that they have now. We have things like pneumatic pressure compression cuffs, electric stimulations now available, obviously the massage guns, and then we have hot and cold therapy. If you look at what most of these things do, it's all about blood flow. It's about increasing blood flow. And that is an important part of recovery, especially when we're looking at the local fatigue that we might see, right? So if we're running lots and our legs are sore, some of these modalities may assist in increasing our recovery, as long as we're getting the right type of nutrition, sleep, and managing stress properly as well. So really what we're trying to do with recovery is we're trying to fill our bucket. All right. So we're going to have all these stresses throughout our day that are going to be emptying our bucket. All right. Our training load, our school work stress, our personal life, that's all going to empty our bucket. Nutrition, sleep, stress management, other recovery strategies, that's what's going to help fill the bucket. So as long as we're filling the bucket more than we're draining it, we'll be recovered and we'll be able to really perform at a higher level and be healthier. And that's why we look at it being the sports science being holistic and having a holistic approach to the athletes. All right. Okay, so that is all for my presentation. Let's hold on here. I gotta stop sharing my screen. How do I do that again? Sorry.
I think Brent, maybe the lower share screen at the bottom, or just exit,
Okay.
or at the very top there should be here, maybe I can do this. Ah, there we go. That work?
All right.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Brett, for that presentation. That was a lot of great information, even up to date information, even in the science, sports science world. Jennifer, do you have any questions for Brett at the moment?
I was hoping to have some questions. I I want my watch to tell me if I'm in the sympathetic or parasympathetic. But I was like, dang, I don't think I have a smart enough watch. I mean, I have a Garmin, but I don't have the Apple to do my heart rate properly. So
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about Garmin if it can measure heart rate variability. I haven't looked into the Garmin one yet, so
when I opened up the screen and I could see like resting high, but I don't see anywhere that says variability. So I'm guessing not. But
yeah, sometimes there might be like a secondary app that can connect to the Garmin that could tell you your heart rate variability. So I know with the Apple Watch, there's an app that I use that tracks heart rate variability, and it does a pretty good job with it. So maybe the Garmin has something similar.
I'll have to look then. But I'm glad that you brought that up because now I know just a little bit more of what I want. So
Yeah.
what I want to find. Yeah. So that was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brent, I just wanted to highlight how at the beginning in one of your slides, as you were talking about, there's like two categories of fatigue an athlete needs to know, and how you were talking about like one's psychological and one's physiological, and how like the difference of the brain and like muscles and then you're the nervous system basically. So do you think for athletes, because I've seen being in the world and see high performance athletes, there has been always such a burnt out aspect to them, and then it's so true, they a lot of people don't see behind closed doors what start of a unhealthy lifestyle they start to live, because we would expect, a lot of high performance or somebody who's done it for a long time to like consistently to keep that motivation going forward, where a lot of them just, go off the rails. So I just wanted you to sort of talk about a little bit more sort of like the motivation to get somebody into that mentality again, because that does really play a big part on some people, even being concussed athletes too, how their neurons on their damage, how does those types of injuries, or somebody that came back from a stroke that had those types of life almost threatening injuries to themselves, how do they recurrence back to that, into that motivational aspect? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, so when we look at that, that's how we have to try and blend the psychology in with the physiology, right? So a lot of the times people are, I mean, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are. You have the if you have the ability to do something to help yourself become healthier, whether it's moving more, whether it's eating right, whether it's sleeping. Like when it comes to physiology, for the most part, most people have the ability to make themselves better somehow, some way. It usually comes down to that psychological piece. Can they find the motivation? Can they find, get out of burnout or whatever it might be that they're struggling with, or some people, they have their circumstances are affecting them, and they just don't feel like doing anything because of what's happening. So it's a matter of finding motivation and then getting that motivation to lead to discipline. Because I think most people, they lack the discipline needed to carry forward on a path of a healthy lifestyle. And so if you can find the motivation is usually fleeting. It helps you for a while, but then it eventually needs to lead to discipline, where you get to the part of, I don't want to do this, but I know I have to. And it's for me, it starts with the psychology. It starts with the motivation. And I think it's just finding something that you enjoy. or finding something that you can do where it just makes you feel good for that day in terms of feeling like you've succeeded, right? So I think one piece of advice I would give to anyone is make sure you find something that's going to keep you motivated, that's going to lead to discipline. And most importantly, make sure you listen to your body. Make sure that you manage that load, because I think a lot of people, they're so gung-ho at the start and they just do too much. And then that physiological fatigue where they're just sore, they're tired, and then it spirals back into not having the motivation to do it because they're too sore and they know what they're going to feel like. So it's a matter of finding the motivation, starting slow, and becoming disciplined.
Perfect. Couldn't say that any better. That's great that you mentioned sort of like the loads, how you were mentioning, which I really want to tie in with that, because you were mentioning how you have the external loads and the internal loads. How you were saying, people gun ho for like going into their fitness regime and don't know really where to start. So I feel like I want to highlight that that was such an excellent key that you sort of highlight, was the monitoring, because a lot of people, when they go into an activity, they always look at like you were mentioning, like how many weights do I need to lift and how fast and the distance. And that's always like a big first thing when anybody is in any type of health and wellness routine. And then they start to comparing, where it's like, hey, it's not that mentality. You can look at it if you're more of a specific person. You're saying the muscle activity, your heart rate percentage, like maybe focusing on that different type of mentality to your training can get to improving. But I love how you were talking about even with the minus loads, and you touch even with like the sleep too, making sure you're having that whole recovery of aspect, like highlighting the importance is that there's just not one way to evaluate yourself. There's multiple ways, and always, like you highlighted, sleep is always number one, because I don't know why, it's just something that all of us, even animals, have, that we don't know explain why we have it, but it seems like that's the one thing I feel like maybe you could speak on this a little bit. So if it's like sometimes people are so highlighted on the biggest thing that they're not looking at, like you said, the bottom of the pyramid had sleep, like that's your foundation. They don't really see the littlest things that actually make a big improvement to the rest. So
Mhm.
yeah, I want to say thank you for highlighting all that, because that's a great way to help people keep in their motivational style, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people, I think, like I said, it's starting to become a little bit more mainstream. We're starting to understand, like, yeah, you got to get sleep. You got to make sure you have your routine. You got to make sure you get the right amount of sleep. I think before it wasn't like that. It was more like, well, if I'm fit, I'm healthy. And people didn't really think that, okay, you should be fit and you should be eating properly and you should be getting enough sleep and you should also be managing your stress. And I know when I talk to people who are just starting out, they always feel very overwhelmed by that. Like, well, that's a lot. Like, I got to make sure I sleep. I got to make sure I eat right. I got to manage. Like, it's a lot. And that's why I always say the best thing to do is start small, and work your way into a lifestyle that, where the motivation has gone and the discipline has now come in. And then all of a sudden you'll find it a lot easier to be like, okay, it's 10 o'clock, I'm going to sleep now. And okay, these are the foods I eat now. This is what I do. This is my day. This is how I start my day. And eventually we're creatures of habit. And unfortunately, a lot of us have a lot of negative habits. But at the same time, when you start building those positive habits, it becomes just that. It becomes a consistent part of your lifestyle that gets easier as you go through it.
Like you said before, the discipline, you got to really put that self in you for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Jennifer, do you have any more further questions? No. Well, Brett, thank you. Thank you so much for, doing this session. I hope everybody in this session today took a lot of valuable information, and people that are going to be watching further. So, Brett, thank you so much. And Jennifer, thank you for attending as well. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And have a great night.